Captain Ben Torres stepped out of his transport ship and took his first breath of Zephyrian air. The atmosphere felt thin but breathable, with a metallic taste that reminded him of copper pennies. Before him stretched the most magnificent palace he had ever seen. The entire structure was made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Towers reached toward the purple sky like frozen lightning, and bridges of pure energy connected different sections of the massive complex. Ben adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and checked his translation device one final time. This mission could change everything for Earth. His home planet desperately needed the rare minerals that only the Zephyrian Empire possessed. Without these materials, Earth's expanding space colonies would fail, and millions of people would suffer. Remember, Captain? His communication device crackled with the voice of Admiral Chen from Earth Command. The Zephyrians have refused every other species that has tried to negotiate with them. They think all other races are inferior. Show them what humans can do. Ben walked toward the palace entrance, his boots clicking against the crystalline ground. Tall, elegant figures emerged from the palace to meet him. These were his first Zephyrians in person. They stood 8 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Their eyes were large and silver, and they moved with a grace that made Ben feel clumsy by comparison. Human delegate, one of them spoke, its voice like the sound of wind chimes. I am Chancellor Nix. You will follow protocol exactly or you will be removed from our world immediately. Ben nodded respectfully. I understand, Chancellor. I am honored to be here. The Zephyrians exchanged glances. They had clearly expected him to be intimidated or to respond with aggression. Instead, Ben maintained his calm composure and followed them into the palace. The interior took Ben's breath away. Rooms floated in midair, connected by streams of energy that served as walkways. Gardens of crystal flowers grew from the walls, their petals singing in harmonious tones. Everything was perfectly ordered and beautiful, but Ben noticed something missing. There was no warmth anywhere. No personal touches, no signs of individual personality or emotion. They entered a vast throne room where hundreds of Zephyrian nobles stood in perfect rows. At the far end, on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive diamond, sat Queen Vex. Ben had studied images of the Zephyrian queen, but seeing her in person was different. She was tall even by Zephyrian standards, with skin that glowed like moonlight. Her silver eyes seemed to see everything, and when she looked at Ben, he felt as if she was reading his very soul. A crown of living crystal grew from her head like delicate branches, pulsing with the same blue light as the palace walls. Approach, human, Queen Vex commanded. Her voice was cold and sharp as winter ice. Ben walked forward, keeping his head high but showing appropriate respect. He had practiced this moment hundreds of times during his journey to the Zephyrian homeworld. When he reached the proper distance, he performed the traditional Zephyrian greeting he had learned from their cultural databases. The queen's silver eyes narrowed slightly. You have studied our ways. Yes, Your Majesty. I believe that understanding leads to respect, and respect leads to successful cooperation. A murmur rippled through the assembled nobles. Apparently, this was not the response they had expected from a human. Tell me, Captain Torres, the queen continued. Why should the mighty Zephyrian Empire concern itself with your primitive species? What could humans possibly offer us that we do not already possess? Ben had prepared for this question, but he also knew that a rehearsed answer would fail. Instead, he spoke from his heart. Your Majesty, humans may not have your advanced technology or your long lifespans, but we have something else. We have the ability to adapt, to find new solutions to old problems, and to work together even when everything seems impossible. Prove it, Queen Vex said coldly. Chancellor Nix stepped forward and gestured to a complex holographic display that appeared in the center of the room. This is a trade simulation. Every species that has attempted negotiations with us has failed this test. You have 1 hour to find a solution that benefits both our peoples without disadvantaging either. Ben studied the display carefully. The simulation showed resource flows, economic projections, and political implications of various trade scenarios. Every obvious solution he could think of would give one side a massive advantage over the other. The Zephyrians had clearly designed this to be impossible, but Ben had not survived years of space exploration by giving up when things looked hopeless. He started looking at the problem from different angles. Instead of focusing on the traditional trade models, he began thinking about what each species truly needed. Earth needed the rare minerals, yes. But what did the Zephyrians really need? Ben had noticed something during his study of their culture. Despite their technological advancement, their society was stagnant. They had perfect order, but no growth, no innovation, no excitement. Your Majesty, Ben said after 30 minutes of work, what if this is not really about trade at all? The Queen leaned forward slightly. Explain. Your people have achieved perfection in technology and order, but perfection can be a trap. Without challenges, without new perspectives, even the greatest civilization can become frozen in place. Ben manipulated the holographic display, showing a new kind of exchange. What if, instead of simple resource trading, we created a cultural and scientific exchange program? Earth provides the minerals you need for our colonies, and in return we send our best minds to work alongside yours, not as servants or students, but as partners bringing fresh ideas and different ways of thinking. The nobles began to whisper among themselves. Queen Vex raised her hand for silence. Continue, she ordered. Humans excel at adapting to new situations and finding creative solutions. We could help your scientists break through research barriers they have faced for centuries. Meanwhile, working with your advanced technology would accelerate our own development by thousands of years. Both species would grow stronger. Chancellor Nix examined the proposed solution and could not hide his surprise. This actually works, he admitted reluctantly. It provides benefits to both sides without creating unfair advantages. But Ben was not finished. The next test came immediately. Very clever, human, Queen Vex said. But can you handle pressure? Our enemies, the Void Hunters, have been raiding our outer colonies. How would your fragile species deal with such a threat? A new holographic display showed tactical scenarios and combat simulations. Ben studied them quickly, his mind racing. The Zephyrians had superior technology and firepower, but they were losing battles against these Void Hunters. Your Majesty, may I ask why your forces have struggled against these raiders? They are unpredictable, Chancellor Nix admitted with obvious frustration. They do not follow logical tactical patterns. They fight with chaos and disorder. Ben smiled for the first time since entering the palace. That sounds familiar. Humans have been fighting unpredictable enemies our entire history. Sometimes the best way to fight chaos is with controlled chaos. He worked with the tactical display, showing how human-style guerrilla tactics and adaptive strategies could complement Zephyrian technology. Instead of the rigid battle formations the Zephyrians preferred, Ben proposed flexible, responsive tactics that could change quickly as situations developed. Your soldiers are trained for perfection, Ben explained. But perfect plans rarely survive contact with an unpredictable enemy. Human soldiers are trained to improvise, to think on their feet, to turn disasters into opportunities. The Queen studied his tactical proposals with growing interest. Show me an example. Ben selected one of the recent battle scenarios and ran it again with his proposed changes. The result was a clear victory instead of the historical defeat. Fascinating, Queen Vex murmured. The final test was the most unexpected. Instead of another technical challenge, the Queen stood up from her throne and walked down to face Ben directly. Tell me, Captain Torres, she said quietly. What do you see when you look at us? Ben was confused by the question, but he answered honestly. I see a people who have achieved wonders that humans can barely imagine. I see incredible intelligence, amazing technology, and perfect order. But I also see... He paused, wondering if he should speak his full thoughts. Continue, the Queen commanded. I see loneliness, Ben said gently. I see a society that has become so focused on perfection that they have forgotten how to connect with each other emotionally. You have everything except the one thing that makes life worth living. The silence in the throne room was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. And what is that? Queen Vex asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Love, Ben said simply. Not romantic love necessarily, but the deep connections that form between people who truly care about each other. Friendship, loyalty, the willingness to sacrifice for others not because it is logical but because it feels right. Ben gestured toward the perfect, orderly nobles surrounding them. Your people stand in formation, but do they stand together? Do they support each other through difficult times? Do they celebrate each other's successes? Do they grieve each other's losses? Queen Vex stared at him for a long moment. Around them, the nobles began to shift uncomfortably. They were clearly not used to such personal discussions. You speak of things our culture has moved beyond, Chancellor Nix said stiffly. Emotional connections are inefficient. They lead to poor decision-making and social disorder. Do they? Ben asked. In human societies, our strongest militaries are built on soldiers who would die for their brothers and sisters in arms. Our greatest scientific breakthroughs come from teams who trust each other completely. Our most successful colonies are founded by people who genuinely care about each other's welfare. He turned back to Queen Vex. Your Majesty, you asked what humans could offer your empire. We can offer something your people have never experienced. We can show you how to be strong not just individually, but together, how to create bonds that make your society unbreakable. The Queen walked slowly around Ben, studying him like a scientist examining a fascinating new discovery. You would teach us to be weak? I would teach you to be truly powerful, Ben replied. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, but a rope is strong because all its fibers support each other. Your society is like a chain. One weak link and everything breaks. Human society is like a rope. Even if part of it is damaged, the rest holds firm. Queen Vex stopped directly in front of him again. And you believe you could integrate into our society? You could work alongside us as equals? I would be honored to try, Your Majesty. The Queen looked around at her assembled nobles, then back at Ben. Something had changed in her silver eyes. They were no longer cold and calculating. Instead, Ben saw something that looked almost like hope. The great feast that followed was unlike anything Ben had ever experienced. The Zephyrians served foods that seemed to be made of pure energy, and the entertainment included music that could be seen as well as heard. But throughout the evening, Ben noticed that the nobles rarely interacted with each other beyond formal requirements. They sat in perfect arrangement, ate in precise timing, and applauded at exactly the right moments. It was beautiful but utterly without spontaneity or warmth. Queen Vex sat at the head of the great table, watching Ben carefully as he navigated the complex social protocols of the dinner. She seemed particularly interested when Ben attempted to start casual conversations with the nobles around him. Most responded with confusion, but a few seemed intrigued by his informal approach. You find our customs strange, the Queen observed. Different, Ben corrected diplomatically. Not strange, just different from what I am used to. On Earth, formal dinners are opportunities for people to get to know each other better. We share stories, laugh together, argue about ideas we care about. Argue? Chancellor Nix looked horrified. At a formal dinner? Ben smiled. Friendly arguments. Debates about philosophy, science, art. It is how we learn from each other and form closer bonds. Show us, Queen Vex commanded suddenly. Ben was surprised. Your Majesty, demonstrate this human custom of friendly argument. Choose a topic and debate it with Chancellor Nix. Ben looked around the silent table. Hundreds of Zephyrian eyes were focused on him. What subject would the Chancellor prefer? The role of emotion in decision-making, Queen Vex suggested with what might have been amusement. Chancellor Nix straightened in his chair. Very well. I maintain that logical analysis produces superior decisions in all situations. Emotional responses lead to errors and inefficiency. I respectfully disagree, Ben replied. Logic is essential, but emotions provide important information that pure analysis cannot. They help us understand the real impact of our decisions on ourselves and others. What followed was a spirited but respectful debate that gradually drew in other nobles around the table. Ben noticed that as the conversation continued, the Zephyrians became more animated and engaged than he had seen them all day. They began interrupting each other, raising their voices slightly, even gesturing with their hands. Queen Vex watched this transformation with growing fascination. When the debate finally wound down, she stood up slowly. Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast dining hall. Today we have witnessed something unprecedented. This human has shown us abilities that we lack. Not technological abilities, but something far more valuable. The entire room fell silent, waiting for her next words. He has shown us how to truly live together rather than simply existing in the same space. How to grow stronger through our connections with each other rather than despite them. Queen Vex walked around the table until she stood directly behind Ben's chair. Captain Torres, I have a proposal for you. Ben stood and turned to face her, his heart racing. Something in her tone suggested this was the most important moment of the entire mission. Your Majesty? Queen Vex looked around at her assembled nobles, then back at Ben. Her silver eyes seemed to glow with inner light. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "I wish you were my mate, human." The words hit the assembled crowd like a physical blow. Nobles froze with food halfway to their mouths. Guards stopped mid-stride. Even the crystal flowers seemed to stop their singing. The entire palace fell silent. Ben stared at the queen in shock, his mind racing to understand what had just happened. Around them, hundreds of Zephyrian faces showed expressions of absolute disbelief. The silence stretched on, heavy with implications that Ben was only beginning to comprehend. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Ben could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as he stared at Queen Vex in complete shock. Around them, the assembled Zephyrian nobles looked as if they had been turned to stone. Finally, Chancellor Nyx broke the silence with a strangled gasp. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot mean—" "I mean exactly what I said," Queen Vex replied calmly, her silver eyes never leaving Ben's face. "This human has shown qualities that our species has lost, qualities that I wish I could claim as my own." The throne room erupted into chaos. Nobles began talking all at once, their voices rising in pitch and volume. Some sounded angry, others confused, and a few seemed genuinely frightened. "This is madness," shouted Lord Kex, a tall noble with crystalline growths covering half his face. "A queen of the Zephyrian Empire cannot mate with an inferior species. The bloodline would be contaminated," added Lady Zara, her pale blue skin flushing darker with emotion. "Our genetic purity has been maintained for thousands of years." "Order," Queen Vex commanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "I will have order in my throne room." The nobles fell silent again, but Ben could see the tension in their rigid postures. Many looked ready to bolt from the room entirely. Ben finally found his voice. "Your Majesty, I am honored beyond words, but I think there may be a misunderstanding here." Queen Vex turned to face him fully. "Is there? Please explain what you think I mean." Ben chose his words carefully. "Among humans, the word mate has specific meanings related to romantic partnership and reproduction. But I suspect that when you use this word, you mean something different." A small smile appeared on the Queen's lips. It was the first genuine expression of warmth Ben had seen from any Zephyrian since his arrival. "Very perceptive, Captain Torres. You are correct. In Zephyrian culture, the term mate refers to the closest possible partnership between two individuals. It encompasses what humans might call friendship, alliance, mentorship, and yes, sometimes romantic connection. But most importantly, it means two beings who complement each other perfectly and make each other stronger." Chancellor Nyx stepped forward, his face showing clear distress. "Your Majesty, even if the term has cultural nuances, the implications remain the same. You are suggesting a permanent bond with an alien species. The nobles will never accept this." "Then perhaps it is time for the nobles to learn something new," Queen Vex replied sharply. "Just as I have learned something new today." She began walking slowly around the throne room, her gaze moving from noble to noble. "For centuries we have prided ourselves on our perfection, our technology, our order, our genetic purity. But what has this perfection brought us?" The nobles shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to answer. "I will tell you what it has brought us," the Queen continued. "Stagnation, isolation, a society where no one truly knows anyone else, where connections are based on duty rather than genuine care, where innovation dies because we are too afraid to try anything that might not be perfect." Ben watched in fascination as Queen Vex revealed depths of thought and feeling that he had not suspected. This was not a sudden impulse, he realized. She had been thinking about these issues for a long time. "Today this human showed us things we have forgotten how to do," the Queen said. "He solved problems through creative thinking rather than rigid logic. He turned a formal debate into a genuine exchange of ideas that engaged everyone present. Most importantly, he looked at us and saw not just our achievements but our needs." Lord Kex spoke up again. "Your Majesty, humans are a young species. They are emotional and unpredictable. They make decisions based on feelings rather than facts. How can such beings be considered our equals?" Ben decided it was time to speak for himself. "Lord Kex, you are absolutely right that humans are emotional and sometimes unpredictable. But these traits are not weaknesses. They are tools that have helped us survive and thrive in ways that pure logic alone cannot." He gestured toward the assembled nobles. "Your people have created wonders that humans can barely comprehend. Your technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. Your society runs with perfect efficiency. But when was the last time any of you felt truly happy? When did you last feel excited about a new discovery or proud of a friend's achievement? The nobles exchanged uncertain glances. Several looked genuinely confused by the questions. Emotions provide information, Ben continued. Fear tells us when something is dangerous. Joy tells us when we are on the right path. Love tells us what is worth protecting. Anger gives us the energy to fight injustice. Your people have become so focused on eliminating inefficiency that you have eliminated the very things that make life worth living. Lady Zara spoke up hesitantly. But emotions lead to conflict. They make people act irrationally. Sometimes, Ben agreed. But they also inspire people to sacrifice for each other. To work harder than logic would suggest is reasonable. To keep fighting when all hope seems lost. During our debate tonight, did you feel more engaged or less engaged than usual? Lady Zara considered the question carefully. More engaged, she admitted. I found myself genuinely interested in the outcome of the discussion. That is the power of emotional connection, Ben explained. When we care about something or someone, we become more than the sum of our individual capabilities. Queen Vex had been listening to this exchange with obvious satisfaction. You see, as she said to her nobles, this is exactly what I mean. Captain Torres understands concepts that we have forgotten. He could teach us to rediscover parts of ourselves that we have lost. Chancellor Nix looked deeply troubled. Your Majesty, even if we accept that humans have certain useful qualities, surely there are less dramatic ways to learn from them than forming a permanent bond with their representative. Queen Vex turned to face Ben directly. Captain Torres, tell me honestly, if I asked you to stay here permanently as my closest advisor and partner, to help our species learn these human qualities you speak of, what would you say? Ben felt the weight of the entire room's attention on him. This was not a decision he could make lightly. It would affect not just his own life but the future relationship between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. Your Majesty, he said slowly, I would be honored to help in any way I can, but I think there might be a better approach. The Queen raised an eyebrow. Explain. What if, instead of one human trying to teach an entire civilization, we created a true partnership between our species? A cultural exchange program where humans and Zephyrians work together, learn from each other, and build something new that neither could achieve alone. Ben walked to the center of the room, addressing the entire assembly. Your Majesty spoke of wanting qualities that I possess, but the truth is I want qualities that you possess as well. Human emotions and creativity combined with Zephyrian logic and technology could create wonders that neither species could imagine on their own. Queen Vex considered this proposal carefully. You would prefer cooperation to assimilation? I would prefer partnership to absorption, Ben replied. Your Majesty, when you said you wished I were your mate, I think what you really meant was that you wished your people could form the kind of deep, meaningful connections that humans take for granted. But those connections cannot be forced or commanded. They must grow naturally through shared experiences and mutual respect. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her silver eyes studying Ben's face. Finally, she smiled again, and this time the expression reached her eyes. Once again, you have shown wisdom that our people lack, she said. Yes, you are absolutely correct. What I truly desire is not to possess human qualities, but to learn how to develop them ourselves. She turned to address her nobles. Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire, I hereby propose a new kind of alliance with the human species. Not a trade agreement or a military pact, but a cultural partnership designed to help both our peoples grow and evolve. The murmur that ran through the assembled nobles was different this time. Instead of shock or anger, Ben heard curiosity and cautious interest. What exactly would this partnership involve? Asked Lord Kex. Ben stepped forward. Exchange programs where humans and Zephyrians live and work together for extended periods. Joint scientific research projects that combine human creativity with Zephyrian technical expertise. Cultural festivals where both species share their art, music, and literature. Most importantly, friendship programs where individuals from both species are paired together to learn from each other on a personal level. Lady Zara looked intrigued. And what would humans gain from such an arrangement? Access to scientific knowledge that would advance our civilization by centuries, Ben replied. Technological solutions to problems we have not even discovered yet. But more than that, we would gain the perspective that comes from working with minds that think differently from our own. Queen Vex nodded approvingly. Captain Torres speaks of benefits that flow both ways. This is the mark of a true partnership, rather than a relationship where one side dominates the other. Chancellor Nix still looked concerned. Your Majesty, this would require significant changes to our society. We would need to modify our educational systems, our work protocols, our social structures. Change is exactly what we need, the Queen replied firmly. We have achieved perfection in stagnation. Now it is time to achieve excellence in growth. She walked back to her throne and sat down, her posture regal and commanding. I hereby decree that the Zephyrian Empire will enter into a cultural partnership with the human species. Captain Torres, will you serve as the first human ambassador to our world? Ben felt a surge of excitement and pride. Your Majesty, I would be honored to accept that position. Excellent. And Chancellor Nix, you will work with Captain Torres to develop the specific programs and protocols for this new partnership. The Chancellor bowed reluctantly. As you command, Your Majesty. Queen Vex stood up again and walked down to where Ben was standing. Now, Captain Torres, I have one more request. Yes, Your Majesty? Teach me to laugh. Ben was so surprised that he nearly laughed himself. Your Majesty? During your debate with Chancellor Nix, I observed that humans express joy through a sound called laughter. I have studied recordings of this phenomenon, but I do not understand how it works. Will you teach me? Ben looked around at the assembled nobles, all of whom were watching with intense curiosity. This was certainly not a request he had expected. Well, Your Majesty, laughter usually happens naturally when something strikes us as funny or joyful. It is not really something that can be taught like a skill. Then make me laugh, the Queen commanded. Ben thought for a moment, then smiled. Your Majesty, what do you call a Zephyrian who tells jokes? The Queen looked puzzled. I do not know. What do you call such a being? A comedian who never gets the timing right because they are too busy calculating the optimal moment for humor. There was a long pause while the Queen processed this. Then, to everyone's amazement, she made a sound that was unmistakably laughter. It was musical and bright, completely different from her usual formal tone. The effect on the assembled nobles was immediate and dramatic. Several gasped in surprise, others stared in wonder, and a few actually attempted to make similar sounds themselves. Fascinating, Queen Vex said, still smiling. I felt a warm sensation in my chest and an urge to share the experience with others. Is this how humans bond with each other? It is one way, Ben confirmed. Shared laughter creates connections between people. It makes us feel closer to each other. The Queen looked around at her nobles, many of whom were still attempting to understand what they had just witnessed. I believe this cultural partnership will be even more valuable than I originally thought. Over the following hours, Ben found himself in the unprecedented position of conducting impromptu lessons in human social behavior for the highest nobles of the Zephyrian Empire. He taught them about handshakes, high fives, and casual conversation. He explained the difference between polite laughter and genuine amusement. He demonstrated how humans use facial expressions to communicate emotions. The Zephyrians proved to be enthusiastic students, though many of their early attempts were awkward. Watching Lord Kex try to give someone a high five was both amusing and touching. The noble's movements were too precise and formal, but his obvious effort to master this strange human custom was endearing. As the evening progressed, Ben noticed a remarkable transformation in the atmosphere of the palace. The rigid formality began to soften as nobles attempted to practice their new social skills with each other. Conversations became more animated. Laughter, though still rare and carefully controlled, began to echo through the crystal halls. Queen Vex watched these changes with obvious satisfaction. Captain Torres, she said during a quiet moment, I believe you have given us something more valuable than any trade agreement could provide. What is that, Your Majesty? Hope, she replied simply. For the first time in centuries, my people are excited about the future, rather than simply maintaining the present. Ben looked around at the nobles, who were still awkwardly but enthusiastically attempting to master the art of casual conversation. Your Majesty, I think this partnership is going to benefit both our species more than either of us can imagine. Queen Vex nodded. I agree, and Captain Torres? Yes, Your Majesty. I want you to know that when I said I wished you were my mate, I was not speaking of romantic attachment. I was expressing a desire for the kind of partnership that transcends species, politics, and protocol. A bond based on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine affection. Ben smiled. Your Majesty, I think that is exactly the kind of relationship our two species are about to build." The Queen extended her hand in the human gesture Ben had taught her earlier. "Partners?" Ben grasped her hand firmly. "Partners." As news of the cultural partnership spread through the Zephyrian Empire and back to Earth, both species began preparing for a new chapter in their histories. Exchange programs were established. Joint research projects were planned. Most importantly, individuals from both species began forming the personal connections that would serve as the foundation for lasting peace and cooperation. Ben Torres, the human who had come seeking a simple trade agreement, had instead helped create something far more valuable. A bridge between two very different civilizations, built on the uniquely human understanding that the strongest bonds are those of the heart. The palace was no longer silent. It was filled with the sounds of learning, growing, and the beginning of true friendship between the stars.